Dick, would you like to take this one first?
All right, well, misogyny, pretty much, um, you know, and it's a vicious cycle. It's not going to change for a long time. The simple fact is that the market is saturated now, and we're seeing more and more gigs being siphoned off the big acts and smaller venues because it's kind of imploded on itself, where there's just drag queens everywhere. So there's two elements to it. Element one is it's saturated itself, so the market has lost interest in drag. The phenomena is starting to fizzle out, I fear. Um, but also, it's been years of all these queens getting paid and having the ability to invest in their drag, having a platform to perform and develop their drag. And drag kings have never really been given that to the same extent. Now you see certain ones that have pushed through, like Phil, myself, Lucifer, uh, Land Cider. We're kind of the exception to the rule, where we've been able to. And I would say, for the most part, the reason I've been able to invest a bit more in my drag, and I don't know about Phil, is mainly because I had a day job that I used to fund it, because it certainly wasn't being paid for gigs until the last 2-3 years. Um, so yeah, I think that there is an interest out there, because I literally just did a gig in my hometown, which I never thought I would do, and it sold out. And Phil has an incredibly successful show on a Monday night, which is notoriously hard in the scene to fill. But I've seen it, like, it's packed. So there is actually an interest out there. It's really down to the producers and the venues, for going along with the easy fix, which is RuPaul. And even to an extent, like, Dragula is huge, huge, and is so inclusive. And it's starting to make ripples in the drag community, because it's so inclusive. And people are starting to see that there is so much more to the art of drag than looking, female, like looking realistic, um, as a female impersonator. So yeah, it's just basically misogyny, and it's just snowballed with RuPaul's Drag Race, and what RuPaul says goes, and people have just gone along with it. But I think it's going to be a long time before we see any more mainstream. I think we got lucky with Land Insider. That's like our token that they let get through into the mainstream. Um, and there's so many amazing artists out there, but it's funding, and it's whether they'll invest in it now. That's kind of where we're at. So that's why we're doing things ourselves.
Yeah, I mean, I can't but echo everything that Dick has just said there. Certainly misogyny was the very first word that popped into my head the moment you asked the question. And I know it's very easy for the community at large to very broadly dismiss that because, we're queers and of course we're inclusive of everyone, but you see it in every possible walk of life, from bi erasure to, butches once upon a time were unacceptable. Femme was the only way to be if you were lesbian, there's always been some kind of bar that AFABs simply cannot hit, like there's just no one acceptable way to exist as an owner of a womb. And certainly in the drag scene, it is incredibly challenging to be taken even partially as seriously as any kind of cis male drag performer. And I know personally, I think next year is my 20-year anniversary of doing drag. And in that 20 years, I've seen it all. I've seen it from the very early stages of my career where, people just looked at you like you were some kind of little upstart of what the fuck do you think you're doing, and recognizing that you have to work twice as hard for half the recognition,
Or
um,
fee.
or if any fee is the other side. Like I did drag for free for years, and now, young queer performers, they're out the closet a wet week in their drag and they think that, it's so easy to get a paid gig, and it's really not, certainly not any meaningful amount of money beyond like tokenism, but certainly in terms of presenting as a mask character, the visual impact is just not as impressive. I think that's the general perception of that, and certainly when it comes to people like Landon Cider, like they have gone to another level of caricature and very kind of impactful visuals. Whereas I think both Dick and I have always kind of gone slightly more on the subtler side of things. It was more about maybe trying to affect a more substantial character than basing the entire act just on an aesthetic. Not obviously that's what Landon Cider or any of those folks do, but I think that's why they started to get traction, because whatever substance might be behind the character itself, they ramped it up, tenfold by adding contacts and big hair and well-crafted costumes and just really bringing it. And I think because of platforms like Dragula, where there is that visibility, there's all of a sudden this realization of, oh, you mean AFABs can actually do this and be entertaining? Who knew? And, we knew for years. But the reality is that the queer scene, and in many queer communities, cis gay men are it. That is, everything is targeted at them, it's marketed at them, it keeps their needs and their interests in mind, and AFABs just kind of fall by the wayside as just an incidental, and I find certainly 20 years ago, like the queer scene was incredibly misogynistic. It was like gay men hated lesbians. It was that simple, If anything, they were there as like your butch bodyguard if you were a bit of a sissy and you wanted your butch lesbian friend, to come and back you up. But beyond that, there was just no space for them. So needless to say, it's been an uphill battle, but that's why we're carving a space that suits us. And rather than trying to fight for a place at that table, we're building our own table. Because we can't find a space that gives us what we want, or a show that makes us feel like we're getting out of it what we're putting into it, or a show that feels like we're not pandering to someone else's expectations. We are creating it for ourselves, and this is what Dick and I are really passionate about, is actually doing something that ticks all of those boxes. I get to be stupid and cheesy and quirky and a massive nerd, and Dick gets to be a snarky fuck, and that's us both happy. But yes, so many drag kings initially start out in the, oh, I'm so suave and I've got swag and whatever, it's kind of your first iteration of exploring what masculinity is to you, and how presenting in a mask way alters how you feel about yourself, and all of that, profound shit that we don't realize we're getting out of it, but that's absolutely what's happening. And then you go through this kind of almost character building arc of, oh, maybe I don't have to be a scumbag and a hateful misogynist character on stage. Not that I ever was, but many drag kings do that. And then, yeah, I mean, Dick, obviously, sorry. Says it in the name, really, doesn't it? But definitely in the last, I'd say 10 years, like the line between me as Alex and me as Phil has blurred so much that I don't know that there is so much a line as just
a different shirt.
A different shirt, precisely. It is just me with a dirty face and a tacky shirt on, and it makes me happy. So
it's not much different to you on a Friday night.
No, exactly. See,
yeah, I think a lot of it is you're absolutely right. We instantly go to toxic masculinity because that's how we're believable as men, and people buy that. Like, that's the worry of it. But like,
how much they like it, isn't it?
Yeah, I've kind of settled into being the grumpy old man. Like, and I think we like when I do cabaret and do gigs and stuff, I do choose music that feels like me, and I do kind of just chat the way I would have done stand-up comedy without a bit like a mustache on. But I think there's probably more characterization when Phil and I get together, and it's wonderful because we never prepped doing stuff together. The first time we did something on stage together, it just clicked who was doing which role, like, and it didn't just stay that way. We flipped. So sometimes I would be the butt of the joke, then he would be the butt of the joke. you know, we would play up to each other's lines, and we would just know that it was safe to do that. Like, you know, it wasn't a real jibe. It was a setup to a bigger comeback. And that it's so rare to get chemistry with someone on stage without having to sort of create the shtick before you go on. But it always felt very natural. The second me and Phil started like doing some hosting and stuff together. And it's great when it doesn't feel like a job, you know, when you feel like you don't have to carry the other person, or you don't have to worry about what that person's going to say, or when you need a natural pause, they read that and they pick it up. And that is so wonderful as a performer, because you are so used to relying only on yourself on a stage when you're hosting, especially, that when you get someone that you can just know that they'll, when you need a wee tap out, they can go straight in without missing a beat, and nobody will have a clue what's going on. So yeah, and we've got similar like sort of sense of humor and stuff, which has been useful.
Absolutely. I mean,
Yeah.
like I could throw something snarky in, but I don't think there's any need. I think everything Dick just said is absolutely bang on the money. You know, that organic chemistry is wonderful to experience, and it's that one of the things I've always struggled with in co-hosting in the past has been either having to fight for every word you get down the microphone because the other person is used to hosting on their own, or just very much enjoys the sound of their own voice, so you don't get a look in. Or the flip side of that is that you're doing all of the legwork and the other person just chimes in every now and again, but doesn't help drive things forward. You know, it's sound bites as opposed to actual natural content and flow, you know. And I think it's one of the things I often suffered at uh, hosting alongside like a drag queen would be that if I would set up a joke expecting that that person would be generous in response and let us both be in on the joke, I would automatically become the butt of the joke, but in a really nasty way, as opposed to in a, this was for the good of this particular moment and this is actually comical for us all, you know. So it was very much punching down as opposed to punching sideways. And I think that is why Dick and I really enjoy working together, is exactly that. We both know exactly what the terms and conditions are in this scenario. Neither one of us is taking anything personally if there is a bit of a dig, you know, because it's all part of the shtick, you know.
Like, it really is a guilty pleasure show. Like, we literally were like, okay, what can we put in the show? I think we sat in about half an hour. We had an entire show structured. We've got like a couple of duets planned. We've got like different sections in the show. So we're gonna have like an agony uncle. We're gonna obviously do some new numbers as solo, and then we're gonna do some duets. There's going to be a lot of audience interaction. So one thing that we both have learned over the years is people love to come to a show, but they also feel like they want to be in the show without pushing that fourth wall too far. And that means just making sure that, you know, they're on board with you the whole way, which means acknowledging them and not ignoring them, because that's when people switch off. So like the poster itself, when you see it, it's very 50s, you know, game show. Growing up, one of my favorite shows was a generation game, and I love that kind of fun engagement with people, and it was just like off the wall and silly. And then Phil and I also have a massive passion, mine more recent than theirs, for Taskmaster. Phil and I are planning to pre-record. Our partners have created a series of devious, I don't know. Actually, do you have any idea, Phil? Actually, in all
No,
honesty,
I asked my partner, is like, what's the chances that Dick's
were you
partner
gonna cheat?
will have told them? And Vic was like, no, I think like Katie basically wants to make you sweat. So I am so here for the fact that like
I mean, give me
this is
two
gonna be
secs to go
fun.
up.
Yeah. I mean, aside from the actual physical, you know, exertion side of things, I get the impression this is very much some kind of, you're making up for like trauma over the last few years.
Great, because that's
Yeah.
what we need as queer people. But basically, yeah, we're going to be pre-recording. Our partners have created a selection of tasks, that sort of Taskmaster style, that we're pre-filming, and we are going to share with the audience on the night. to get them to guess who did better at which task. And I imagine they're going to be absolutely bloody ridiculous knowing these two. And we genuinely do not know what's going to happen. I've just been told to show up in drag on the 19th in Vic's parents' back garden, which is rather large.
High budget, which means as you can tell.
Outdoor. So yeah, we're gonna have things like that. We're gonna have like the kind of agony uncle aspect. We're gonna have numbers, of course. We're gonna have some games with the audience. Have a couple of wee freebies and just an all-round proper kind of old school cabaret night, but without drag queens. Just us two being us two. And I'm really excited about it because we always have something to say. We're both really good at reacting in the moment, and I love a bit of randomness. So, you know, it very much will feel like we are steering the ship at all times throughout the show. It's not going to be like amateur or people panicking, you know. So, yeah, I'm really excited about it because hopefully, like our people, I've been so lucky, like people that come and support any gigs that I've done. I know Phil has the same, and that's why we figured online tickets would be good as well, because there's a lot of people that follow Phil and want to see Phil, and it makes it accessible for everybody, which is also obviously really important to us too. So bit of everything, we bit of
little sprinkling.
I'm gonna get my perm done fresh and everything.
Delightful.
Oh,
I might
yes.
get a little buzz cut. Small kind of like public service announcement type thing, not to bring the tone down, but for anybody who is AFAB or identifies as female or has been a butch lesbian on the scene in the last 20 odd years, or who has struggled to find a space where they feel safe and comfortable, that is exactly what we're trying to craft here. Okay, we're sick of everything that RuPaul's Drag Race has brought to drag, in the sense of the only way to have an identity is to be as toxic as possible and to be as bitchy as possible and to tear other people down, because that unfortunately is the bit that seems to get most traction. You know, we want to create a show that embraces all of the nerdy, joyous things that people like us enjoy. We're going to be shady as fuck to each other, but not.
Oh yeah, okay, glad I'm really glad you clarified that bit.
Yes, but like, not to you.
Am I out of the show, or
are we doing a different show? I'm so confused.
This is great.
So yes, we would like for people to feel safe, that they're not going to be, you know, drawn into something that makes them uncomfortable, but it's very much as much as you're willing to give into it, you will absolutely get in return. So
yeah, it's an interactive, tongue-in-cheek, or anywhere you want to put your tongue, show. It's good old-fashioned innuendos. It's a little bit camp. We tease each other, but it's also incredibly entertaining. We're going to be doing brand new numbers, and like I said, yeah, we're bringing like digital elements into it. You can live stream to your home, so accessibility shouldn't be an issue for people. Accidental Theatre is such a wonderful space because it is so inclusive and welcoming, and have been wonderful supporters of other queer events. Like we had the Trans Queertopia Cabaret for Trans Pride last year. So it just felt like the right space to do this in, because we know that those that come will feel safe. And it's not just for queer people, it's for allies as well, who can respect those kind of spaces and embrace just good old-fashioned fun in the show.
You can find me on @FilthyGorgeous on Insta.
And @Dyke on Insta as well.
I've long abandoned Facebook, so don't bother, basically.
Yeah, I mean, we're in our late 30s, early 40s now, so one social media is